Chapter 2. Exiled into the Cave of Treasures. When the gates of Eden shut behind them, the air changed. Gone was the fragrance of the garden, the warmth of unbroken fellowship. The earth beneath their feet was dry, cracked, and sharp. The light seemed thinner, as if the sun itself grieved. Adam and Eve were no longer clothed in glory, only in the rough garments God had sewn for them, coverings of mercy in a world that would now wound them. The book of Adam and Eve describes their first journey, stumbling across a barren plain until they reached the mouth of a cave. It was no palace, no sanctuary, yet this would be their dwelling. The Ethiopian tradition calls it the Cave of Treasures. The name sounds almost deceptive. There were no jewels, no gold. The treasure was something far more dangerous to keep, the memory of God's presence and the promise that one day redemption would come. Inside, the air was cold and damp. Shadows clung to the walls. Adam and Eve had never known darkness before. In Eden, day and night were filled with God's light. Now the blackness pressed against them, an almost physical force. Here, in this hollow of the earth, they were to begin their training, not for comfort but for war. The text says, Adam fell on the floor of the cave and wept until his voice failed. Eve wept beside him, both of them overwhelmed by the crushing weight of separation. And it was here, in this moment of deepest weakness, that the enemy struck. Satan had not been idle since the expulsion. The book says he approached the cave not in rage, but with a calculated malice, carrying with him the one weapon he knew could undo them: despair. In the silence of the night, Adam heard a sound that was neither wind nor beast. A low, guttural wail rose into a howl so piercing it felt as though the walls of the cave would split. This was not the roar of a predator. It was the voice of hatred itself. The text describes it as a cry that entered into their bones, as if to shatter the courage God had left in them. Eve clung to Adam, trembling. Adam pressed his hands to his ears, but the sound was inside him. And then came the words, mocking, twisting, aimed to poison hope. "Look at you now," the voice taunted. "From glory to dust, from the throne to the pit, you will never see the garden again. The one who made you has abandoned you." But in that cave, something happened the enemy did not expect. Adam, through the tears, began to pray. Not the easy prayers of Eden, but the desperate cry of a soul in exile. "O Lord, do not forsake the work of your hands." Eve's voice joined his, and the darkness seemed to recoil. The Cave of Treasures became, in that moment, more than a shelter. It became the first altar outside Eden, the first battleground where prayer was not a ritual, but a weapon. Here they began to learn what all exiles must learn, that the absence of God's visible presence does not mean the absence of God. Ethiopian tradition holds that in this cave, Adam kept certain sacred things given by God before the expulsion, symbols of a covenant yet to be fulfilled. It was a place of both grief and preparation, a holding ground for the promise that a son would come to crush the serpent's head. And maybe that's why Satan's scream still matters. It was not just an outburst, it was an admission. The enemy knew that even outside Eden, the war was not over. The Cave of Treasures would forge warriors out of the broken. The text ends this scene with Adam lifting his head and saying, "We will not leave this cave until the Lord commands us." That is the resolve that makes the enemy tremble, not perfect circumstances, but unshakable loyalty in the worst of them. And it is in this same cave, on another night, that the enemy would return, not with a scream, but with a disguise so beautiful it could almost pass for a blessing. Chapter 3. The enemy's first disguise. The Cave of Treasures had become a place of prayer and survival. Adam and Eve were beginning to adjust to their new reality, gathering food from the barren land, seeking water in the cracks of stone, offering daily petitions to the God they could no longer see. But in war, the enemy rarely strikes the same way twice. The first attack had been blunt: darkness, fear, despair. It had failed. Now, Satan would come with something far more dangerous: beauty. The book of Adam and Eve tells us that one day, as Adam wandered a short distance from the cave in search of food, he saw a figure in the distance. The sun caught her skin like polished onyx. Her hair, long and flowing, shimmered in the heat. She moved with a grace Adam had never seen outside of Eve herself. Her eyes held an intensity that seemed to pierce his soul, and when she spoke, her voice carried the melody of rivers and the whisper of the wind. This woman was no ordinary stranger. She was a fabrication, a perfect illusion woven by the adversary himself. Every detail was calculated, not just to attract Adam, but to make him forget. Forget the pain of exile, forget the warnings of God, forget his covenant with the woman who shared his life and calling. She spoke of comfort, of rest from the hardships of the wilderness. She promised food without toil, shelter without labor, companionship without the demands of obedience. Then her words grew bolder. I can give you more than what you lost: power over this land, authority over all living things, no more fear, no more waiting for promises that never come. It was a masterstroke. In that moment, Adam's mind flashed with the memory of Eden, the fruit-laden trees, the cool shade, the rivers of life. His heart ached and his steps faltered. The temptation was not wrapped in rage or threat. It came dressed as kindness, as hope. But deep within, another memory stirred. The voice, the command in Eden that had been clear, unbending and full of love. You shall have no other gods before me. The memory rose like a wall between him and the illusion. The words of God became a mirror, and in that mirror the beauty twisted. The eyes that seemed so inviting now glimmered with malice. The voice that promised peace now dripped with contempt. Adam stepped back, and the mask slipped. The woman's form wavered, and in its place, the shadowed figure of the enemy emerged, smiling, but with the cold smile of a predator who had nearly won. Every blessing not from God, Adam said aloud, is a trap in disguise. The illusion shattered like glass. Satan's form twisted and retreated into the wilderness, his plans for this day undone. But the battle had left its mark. Adam returned to the cave shaken, not because he had fallen, but because he realized how close he had come. The text records that Adam told Eve everything. They prayed through the night, asking God for discernment, that they might see through any mask the enemy wore. This was the birth of spiritual vigilance, the understanding that evil often comes dressed in the garments of good, that not every opportunity is divine, and that some doors lead straight back into chains. For the Ethiopian tradition, this episode is more than ancient history. It is a warning for every generation. The most dangerous deceptions are not the ones we can easily recognize, but the ones that look like answers to our prayers. Adam learned in that moment what we must learn now. The enemy knows how to counterfeit light. He can weave desire, beauty, and promise into something that feels like destiny, but is designed to destroy. And so the cave of treasures became more than a refuge. It became a watchtower. For Adam knew the enemy would return again, and next time the disguise might be even harder to see, and in the days to come, another sacred moment would test them, not through temptation, but through the covenant of marriage itself.